Behind a legal entity, there's people driving it. That's the beauty of corporate. At the end of the deal, whether you're a buyer or a seller, one party wants to buy this company and the other wants to sell it. So you're all working towards the same end goal. I got all the negativity, what about your career? I'm not fully qualified at this point. You can't do both. And I just thought, well, why can't I? Why not?
Let me ask you a question. If you had to score yourself between 0 and 10, 0 being really poor, 10 being perfect, on your work-life balance currently, how well you juggle family life, if you have family, your career, your personal interests, a sense of balance in your life, where would you score yourself right now? I ask that because my podcast guest on Business Unlimited today is a corporate lawyer. Her name's Stacey Browne, and central to her career journey has been considerations around her values, what's important to her, and family comes through that. And it's not either or, it's not family or career. She's been able to balance both, mainly because she's been intentional about thinking through what she wants. She's had a vision as much for what family should look like as she has for a corporate legal career. So I really encourage you to dig into what she has to say and reflect upon your own journey and where you're at. And is it time to take stock of where you're at and just ask some questions of yourself and reflect so that you can live the life that you want? And that's what we're all looking for. Stacey Browne, welcome to Business Unlimited. Great to have you in the studio with us.
Thank you.
We've got to know each other a little bit over the last few months. We'll talk about some of that journey. But you are with a legal firm. You're a corporate lawyer called Milners currently.
Yes.
They're based in Leeds.
Yep.
But you live and are based in Doncaster.
That's right.
So there's a little bit of a story there as well.
Yeah.
I want to go back in time and find out what your history is, your background. You're now a corporate lawyer. That sounds like a big title, working with some big businesses, selling, mergers, acquisitions, buying, all the legals that go with that. That's a really important piece of work.
I primarily started in law. So I did my undergrad at Sheffield, actually. I did a law degree here. And when I completed that, I did 2 years out and I travelled Australia. And I thought before I settle down and find my roots, go and travel the world, see some culture. What started with 6 months originally as planned turned into 2 years. I loved it out there. And I actually worked over there with an energy company where I was knocking on doors, selling energy to people. And I really enjoyed it. It's the interaction with people, and speaking with people from all walks of life. And I remember at the end of my shift, families would invite me in and I'd sit and have tea at the table and things like that. Really interesting. And I worked for a legal firm over there in Australia, a PI firm. And
PI being?
Personal injury.
Personal injury.
Yeah, personal injury. I really enjoyed that, but you do get very involved in families and emotionally. And I found that quite difficult to leave work at work. I took the emotion with me home and I would think about clients a lot. So I didn't feel like it was an area of law that I wanted to specialise in long term. But I fell pregnant with my first child and decided to come home because you just want your friends and family around you, don't you, at that time? And I got all the negativity, what about your career? I'm not fully qualified at this point. You can't do both. And I just thought, well, why can't I? Why not? So that became my mission. And my son went to nursery at 9 months and I went back to work as a paralegal. And started my training contract soon after. So I gained a training contract at a firm that I was hitting good targets with. And I once I'd secured that training contract, I went to law school in Guildford and I did my master's degree. So difficult, juggling it all at once.
So you were doing a master's degree whilst working?
Yes.
as a
Yes.
outside, and that was that a particular type of course that you could do that with?
Yes. So it was a master's degree in law, business, and management, and within that is incorporated the legal practice course, which you had to do at the time to qualify as a solicitor. So I did that course full time, and I worked part time because I didn't want another student loan. So I went to work. My son went to nursery. I picked him up. I did the mum bit, put him to bed, and then I worked all night through the early morning. Got up, did the same thing, and I'd have set days where I'd be in uni, and then set days where I'd be at work. So no life really for a whole year, juggling everything, but worth it in the end because it got me to where I wanted to be. And I qualified as a solicitor. Within that, you do a lot of different disciplines, and I chose corporate because for me, it was less emotional. So I didn't have to take the emotions of people home with me as such. And I found that easy to manage. I loved the transactional part of that sector. So in corporate, it is pretty transactional. And I love to get to know the ins and outs of a business, their vision, what drove them, the people behind it, and being really involved in that.
You're clearly a people person.
Yes.
Would you say that you have to be as a corporate lawyer? Because the first impression from somebody looking outside in, and there's plenty of TV shows that would have brought that out in the past, that it's quite a cutthroat world.
Yeah.
It's dog eat dog. It's one-upmanship. It's always adversarial because the legal context is often adversarial.
Yeah.
But the way you talk is breaking that down. It is about people. It's about what makes them tick. Do you challenge some of those assumptions sometimes?
Absolutely, yeah, because behind a legal entity there's people driving it, and there's people working in it, and it's people buying it and selling it, and I'm a firm believer that people buy people. So if you're not a nice person, they're not going to come back to you or want to work with you. And likewise, I've had clients where I've thought, not again. I'm just not interested in that again. So it works both ways. There's got to be mutual understanding, and we're all on the same page. We're all meant to be working together to get to the same end goal. That's the beauty of corporate. At the end of the deal, whether you're a buyer or a seller, one party wants to buy this company and the other wants to sell it. So you're all working towards the same end goal.
So going back to when you qualified and having done the masters, when are we talking about? What year?
It was nearly 6 years ago. Yes.
And at that point, talking of goals, did you have an idea of what you wanted from your profession, what the future was going to look like for you?
Yeah. I always wanted to be the best lawyer that I could be, with the best knowledge that I could have, to do the best job for my clients. So that was my goal within work. I don't think you ever feel like you've hit that. You're always learning something. The law's always changing. And so you've always got to adapt. You're working with different companies. But from a personal perspective, I wanted to work my way high enough up that I could comfortably work part-time, because things don't take me as long. I'm very efficient at my job. So I wanted to be able to work part-time, to spend more time with my family. I feel I've this year been able to achieve that. So I've just hit that.
So coming out of qualifying, did you go straight into a corporate job at that point?
I did, yes. And I've worked for many different firms. I've worked for really, really big, multinational firms, and I've worked for regional firms. And I like the smaller firms rather than the larger firms, and it's each to their own, whatever works for you. But personally, I felt that to be where I wanted to be in my personal life, I wanted to work for a more understanding, more personal firm. So I've still got really good quality clients, and really nice clients, but I work with nice people as well. Not to say that the larger firms are all monsters, they're not. But it just worked better for me in terms of balance. So I'm very fortunate. I love my job. I love what I do. But my family is really, really important to me. And so I needed to find that balance.
Fascinating. And what you've touched upon is culture.
Yes.
When you walk into a business, when I walk into a business as a business coach, I can perceive and I can pick up the culture, which is values lived out as behaviors. I see patterns.
Yeah.
Often it's like the fish are the last to see the water. Inside that business, it's difficult for you to see it, but an outside observer can see it. Every business has a culture. Whether they've defined it is another question.
Yeah.
And often the challenge listening to is that the bigger you get, the danger is, I think, that unless that culture's been intentionally forged and articulated and communicated and presented and engineered, you'll have one, but it probably won't be going in the direction that others would be pleased about.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you can't be a big company and not have a good culture, but it does get challenging at scale, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what would you say your observations have been about culture and where you've worked and where it's not worked, and how you describe the culture of a business that you do enjoy, which clearly with Milner's you are enjoying at the moment. So what do you see as the differences there?
Yeah, well, for me, Milner's, they listened. They just listened to me. I was at a point in my life where when I went to this interview, it weren't just them interviewing me. I was interviewing them. And I was really keen to learn if this was a firm that I wanted to work for. Because of where I was in my life as well. It's got to work both ways. And they listened to me. And I started with them. I was on a full-time basis when I first started, but I had adjusted hours. So it worked for my son being at school, and I could be there for the pick-up and the drop-off, which was very important to me. And they understood that if completions were later in the evening or things like that, I had my non-negotiables. So I like tea time with my kids. I really enjoy.
So tea time and bedtime, they're not non-negotiables, aren't they?
Tea time and bedtime.
Very good.
And that's something I learnt in COVID that I was missing out on a lot when I was in the office a lot. So tea time and bedtime were important for me, and it's important for my children as well that I'm there. But with the mutual understanding that if I need to work late, which sometimes I do, I will just log back on afterwards.
I think one of the problems you can often see in bigger companies is this presenteeism.
Yes.
Where you need to be seen to be seen.
Yes.
What do you need to see in the leadership of an organisation that's going to facilitate that trusting culture?
I think that's the key word is trust, and I think with Milner's, they can see the work is being serviced, so they trust me, they know the work's being done. And that's what matters. The clients are happy, they keep coming back. So the word of mouth is working. We're getting good referrals from current clients, so it all works hand in hand. I remember one boss said to me, this was before I actually qualified, you shouldn't take your full hour's lunch break because you need to be seen to be sat at your desk. And I said, but we're really quiet. There's, I'd be sat at my desk. There's nothing there at my desk to be done. And she said, but you need to be seen. You need to be seen at your desk. And I thought, I'm not sure.
Did you ask the question why, or what's behind that? What was the motivation for that to have to be the case?
Just to be seen at your desk.
Right.
So yeah. So you
that's a red flag, isn't it?
It is. But with these experiences that aren't always pleasant, for me, I learn what kind of lawyer I don't want to be, and what kind of team leader that I don't want to be. And you've got to find that understanding and have that empathy with staff. Like, work isn't everything for everybody. Everyone has a life outside of work. And you've got to be understanding with that for it to work well.
You mentioned COVID. A lot of businesses had to adapt, clearly. Was the legal profession generally under pressure during COVID? Was it an advantage? Was it a disadvantage? Some sectors thrived in it, others really struggled.
Work fell off a cliff, It was very much businesses didn't want to buy or sell because we didn't know where we were going to be. Trading had come to a standstill. So then valuations were going down, so people weren't getting as much for the money. It was a strange time for corporate, and for me personally, I worked for a firm at the time that was undergoing their own merger, and so within that merger, we ended up with 2 corporate teams with twice as many people, and not as much work because we're in COVID. So that came with its challenges, and we were all working from home, with various different restrictions on furlough, salary, just to help the firm get through. But from a career and work perspective, it wasn't a great time for corporate. But from a personal perspective, I got to be at home and I got to be present, and it was the first time actually that I realised what I was missing out on. So the presenteeism meant that I was in the office late, so I would miss tea times, or I'd come home and my son would already be in bed. And quite often he would still be awake in bed, waiting for me to come home to say goodnight. And when I look back on that now, it's not something I'm proud of, really, that it took something like that to open my eyes. But yeah, I think from a personal perspective, it was very good for me. And from that moment, I have never worked in an office full time.
I think you've just described the journey of lots of people in the country.
Yes.
Who've been through that same realisation, that awakening that happened when they realised the crazy sort of culture that they might have been living in, and really working out what's important to you, which is really what values means, what's important to you.
Yes.
And now that they're your non-negotiables, you're shaping a career around them rather than the other way around, which is a great example. That takes courage sometimes, doesn't it, to stand against the prevailing winds, particularly in a competitive landscape that you're in. But since COVID, describe the journey. What's been happening? Obviously, you then joined Milner's because of that realisation.
Yes.
And from there on in, it's been upwards ever since, from what I can see.
It has, yeah. And it's about sort of knowing what it is that makes you comfortable. And it took something like that for me to realise what I wanted, what I was missing out on, and what I didn't want to do anymore. And from that, I then went to an interview with a totally different perspective. So if it wasn't that, then it wasn't for me. So why waste either of our time? And if you're not going to be happy, then what's the point? We spend a lot of our time at work. So if we're not happy, then what's the point? If our family aren't happy and that's what's important to us, then what's the point?
And I suppose part of that is just the self-awareness that's growing really for you of your personality type. I think half of the time people might go into a career not knowing who they are and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and being willing to say, this is who I am, this is who I'm not.
Yeah.
Are you looking for somebody like me? Is, like you say, interviewing the interviewer.
Yeah.
People can go into an interview feeling quite intimidated and telling the interviewer what they think they want to hear, but actually being willing to be really honest about what you're looking for is a great example in the way you've described it.
Definitely.
So the work that you've done with Milner's since you joined them post-pandemic, has it got to the point where there's more work than you can cope with and you've had to think about your own team itself?
Absolutely, yeah. So I came into Milner's with a vision of building corporate, and so that is what we've done. And it got to a point where I was working twice my hours, so I had to have that honest conversation with my boss. He was fully aware of it, very supportive, and we brought somebody else to the team, which is lovely because now I can breathe again. I've got time, and it's more manageable. But even in those times, I still logged off for tea time, bath time, bedtime. Then I'd log back on, and sometimes I was working silly hours. But this is what I mean. It's swings and roundabouts. You don't mind. The management were listening to me. It wasn't expected of me that I worked that time. They were recruiting for somebody. So in the short term, I was happy to do so. So I put in those hours to make sure that the work was serviced for our clients. And that's what supported our vision in growing. So, but it's it's still important to be honest about, even in those times, I still had that time with my children. So there's no resentment there. It was a choice. What I chose to do was working late was my choice, and it wasn't expected. So I think that really helps.
But what's interesting listening to you, Stacey, is that though there have been those times where you've put in the late hours, there's also been a recognition that that should then move on to you having some support, some other paralegals around you.
Absolutely.
Is that with a view to less late nights?
That's right, yeah.
Which
and that's exactly what's happened.
The evolution, really.
Yeah, because then you delegate your work as a team.
Yeah.
And there's more people to service the work.
Yeah.
So it goes a long way.
So how many in the team now in Doncaster or around you?
Yes, there's a partner that heads the team, then there's me. I head the corporate department, and then we've got 2 other people in the team. So it's lovely. It's still very personal.
And is the idea to build a client base around the Doncaster area? So, you're not travelling up to Leeds a lot. You can do it more locally to you?
Yes. I mean, that's my idea, my vision. We do work with companies and people all over the place. It's not just set in one geography, but because I'm Doncaster based and I'm born and bred there, and it's important to me to work within the community that I'm from. So that is where we've started to build. So building relationships with referrers and potential clients, and then they speak to people that they know, and word of mouth gets out. So-and-so's done this deal, and that's how we build.
And we met, didn't we, at an event?
We did.
Probably 4 or 5 months ago. And started a conversation. It was like, well, you've got similar clients to me. You're talking to business owners. I'm talking to business owners.
Right.
Some of those want to sell. Some of them want to buy. There's clearly an opportunity for referrals. But through your journey and working with business owners, what have you learned about business?
Yeah.
As well as obviously being a corporate lawyer, what are you seeing about business that is part of your journey?
One of the most common things that happened to me is people don't think about when things are going to go wrong, and people don't think, they set things up without the end goal in sight. So then they get towards, they've built this empire. Now what? What do I do with it? Or they want to exit. How do I do that? How do I make this company ready to sell? And so we get a lot of those events come to us, and it's one recurring issue that I do see quite a lot, because no one thinks of the bad. Even when they set up with family, they think, oh, it's my brother, it'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, right.
And then you're having to set up 2 completely separate meeting rooms because they won't sit together.
Have you not watched Succession?
Yeah, they're the 2 things that I notice in that happens in the corporate world, within businesses. But yeah, starting
with the end in mind is not an easy concept to get your head around to begin with, until you realise how important it is. I mean, a question I sometimes ask business owners is, what's the business going to look like when it's finished? And they say, well, what do you mean when it's finished? It'll never be finished. So if you went under a bus tomorrow, what would happen to the business? Well, yeah. And then there's usually a thunderous silence.
Yes.
Actually, it would potentially die with them because they haven't put things in place.
Right.
And yet they've got responsibility for people with families.
That's right.
And it really brings it home, the need to start thinking about letting go, delegating, putting systems management in place, building the team, and looking towards exit. But also the challenge for a lot of business owners, dare I say, middle-aged men, it's like, well, what's life going to look like? This is my baby. Yeah. This is who I am. It's my identity.
Yeah.
If, I'm not going to be spending 6 hours on a golf course, and all those horror stories of people who've sold a business and then have a heart attack 6 months later because it's more difficult for them out in the wilderness than in the business.
Yeah.
So thinking that through and being willing to wrestle with that. Do you come across that sort of challenge, the mindsets?
Yes, I do. You really do need to know the business to be able to advise them. And I think this is what sets me out a little bit, because I do listen to the client, what they want. And then I'm working with a client currently, and he wants to set up a will. He's got several businesses. He's setting up a will. And so he wants X, Y, and Z to happen upon his death. that's absolutely fine. But your articles for every company, they don't marry up with this will. So we need to sort it out. And you get the sort of the confusion of, well, it's my business, so why can't I do this? Why can't I just put it in my will and that happen? And so you have to explain it. You have to listen to really what they want, and then point out something to them. Advise them, that, well, if you want to do that, that's absolutely fine, but we will need to do X, Y, and Z, and then this can work together,
So you're opening their eyes up to what they don't yet see.
Yeah, but you can't do that unless you understand them, unless you understand their vision. This is what I love about my job. It's very, it's the people side of it. It's the interaction with them, and learning about their business and what they want to achieve. And it's the same in the midst of the business as well. When a business is operating and they've got a vision of how they want to see it in 5 years' time, and so you have to listen to where they want to be and advise, well, actually, from a risk perspective as well, I would suggest that you look at getting X, Y, and Z in place, whether it's a shareholders agreement, whether you need to be looking at your articles to make sure that there's certain restrictions in there, and you get to know the life of the business. And it's the same for a sale, and the same for a purchase. You need to make sure that everything is working in the background, that all your books are properly recorded, and because otherwise a buyer is going to come in and pull that to pieces, and it's going to negatively impact you. So it's about preparing yourself for those things happening.
The due diligence process, as we call it, that's more involved than a lot of people imagine.
Yes.
And understanding why a business has value and what value it has, and how to ensure it's as valuable as it can be if you're selling, or when you're a purchaser, beating it down on price because they haven't got certain things in place. Often for me as a business coach, if a business is still dependent on the owner, then who's going to buy that business that's still dependent on the owner? Yes, there might be an earn-out period where there's some consulting from the business. But if there's no clear exit strategy, and if the business owner comes out and it collapses and can't go on and make money for the new buyer, they're not going to buy it, are they? And that must be challenging for some people to get their heads around as you observe it.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating journey. We're crossing paths really in the same space with business owners. What do you think you're learning about yourself in this process? You're talking like a coach. You listen, you ask good questions, you have to understand their business.
Yeah.
What are you learning about yourself as you go through this journey?
I'm learning about the personal skills, especially, and what keeps a company ticking. What do they want? What do they want to see? What do they want from me? What do they expect from me? And delivering. I think managing expectations is huge. If you say you can do something, you've got to be able to do it. And if you can't, just be honest. The only person in my world, if I say I'm going to do something and I can't, it's going to take more time away from me in my life by making that promise, because I'm going to keep that promise. Otherwise, the alternative is you're going to let that client down. And so I think you do have to be very mindful of saying no as well, and managing expectations. And clients actually appreciate that. So there's times where I've said, that a client has really, really wanted to complete at, say, 7, 8 o'clock on a certain day. It's got to be done by then. Well, that's fine. But I am going to be in the swimming baths because my son's got a swimming lesson, and it's such short notice. You give me 1 hour's notice. I will complete this deal for you, but I'm going to be in the swimming baths. And they're fine with that, because I've set that expectation. If it can't wait, I'll have to make it work around my commitments. And 9 times out of 10, they actually find it funny. They say, yeah, I'll be on the side of a football pitch or something myself. It makes you relatable, like a real person. And I think people appreciate that. So I'm learning that you don't have to be a corporate monster. No. You don't have to be a big, stern, dominant person.
Just set good boundaries.
That's right.
I think sometimes listening to you, you're probably holding the mirror up to others on the fact that they need to be more organised and better at their own planning.
Yeah.
Because what's the old adage? Your bad planning is not my emergency.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're probably coming up against that quite often. And I would imagine, it's quite forceful sometimes, because some of these business owners, they're quite demanding and domineering. So being able to communicate in an assertive way that disarms them is probably some of the skill that you're talking
There's got
about.
to be mutual respect, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that goes far.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you, Stacey. And I think a lot of people listening, certainly in terms of that work-life balance, will be intrigued to hear. Clearly, you operate with integrity. You do what you say you'll do when you say you'll do it.
Yes.
But you've learned to manage your own expectations. I think that sort of language is going to be really useful for people to reflect in their own life, whether they're employed or a business owner.
Yeah.
You're bringing in a lot of concepts that really apply across both. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It sounds like there's a great future ahead. You're building the team,
Thank
building
you.
the client base and building family at the same time.
Yes.
Great. Well done. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.